keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea. Daily walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. Through this world of toil and snares, if I falter, Lord, who cares? Who with me my burden shares? None but thee, dear Lord, none but thee. Just a closer walk with thee.
All right, so chapter 26, the first 14 verses are dealing with the curtains. And let me do, well, I can't do that. They're dealing with the curtains, and it's not a great word. Coverings may be a better word. So let's just go through there. It's there's 4 different types of covering, 4 different layers of coverings that we'll see. They each have I guess a different purpose. Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twisted linen, and blue and purple and scarlet material. You shall make them with cherubim, the work of skillful workmen. I think the cherubim, therefore, are embroidered on them. Exactly, for instance, we're given 3 colors. Is it a panel of one, a panel of a different color, a panel of a third color? Is it the 3 colors intermixed all in the same? I've seen artist renditions of this that reflect all these different potential combinations. Not sure it really matters. There is nowhere in the Bible that I know of, or that I've been able to find, where there is any significance given to the colors at all, and yet we are given specific colors. We're going to find to what detail we're given specific colors in just a minute. So we've got these linen drapes that are purple and blue and scarlet. They got cherubim that are embroidered on them. The length of each curtain shall be 28 cubits, and the width of each curtain 4 cubits. All the curtains shall have the same measurements. So there's 10 of them. And that's what it takes to cover apparently 3 walls in the tabernacle, because the front wall has got a different covering. 5 curtains shall be joined to one another, and the other 5 curtains shall be joined to one another, and you shall make loops of blue on the edge of the outermost curtain in the first set, and likewise you shall make them on the edge of the curtain that is in the outermost of the second set, and you shall make 50 loops in the one curtain, and you shall make 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that is in the second set. The loops shall be opposite each other, and you shall make 50 clasps of gold, and join the curtains to one another with the clasps, that the tabernacle may be a unit. Then you shall make curtains of goat's hair for a tent over the tabernacle. You shall make 11 curtains in all. The length of each curtain shall be 30 cubits, the width of each curtain 4 cubits. The 11 curtains shall have the same measurements. You shall join 5 curtains by themselves, and the other 6 curtains by themselves, and you shall double over the 6th curtain at the front of the tent. And you shall make 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that is on the outermost of the first set, and 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that's the outermost of the second set. You shall make 50 clasps of bronze. And you shall put the clasps into the loops and join the tent together, that they may be a unit. And the overlapping part that is left over in the curtains of the tent, the half curtain that is left over, shall lap over the back of the tabernacle. And the cubit on one side and the cubit on the other of what is left over in the length of the curtains of the tent shall lap over the sides of the tabernacle on one side and on the other to cover it. I thought I heard that kill off you. And you shall make a covering for the tent of ram's skin, dyed red, and a covering of, and this translation here says porpoise skins above. I realize some translations say badger, and some translations say sea cow, and some translations say, there's another one. But anyway, goat skins, that's what I was trying to come up with, which probably is closer to what it was, but we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, so that's the 14 verses dealing with the tabernacle curtains. Skip the tabernacle, get to the curtains. Here we go. We've got this right here. This is showing this interesting little way to connect all this together. You put all these 50 loops on each edge, and then on the inner part, this is the inside curtains. You see the little cherub that are supposed to be embroidered there. The inner part, these are gold clasps that you use to lock these things together. On the outer part, the goat's hair tent, it was bronze that was used, which would be a little bit more, we'll go with durable. So anyway, that is what was going on with those things. It's very specific about this, and I do think that this is one of the important things to take away from this. We'll talk about this more in detail when we're making application in a little bit. But he specifies about those things that it may be a unit. He's very, very careful to give instructions that there are 10 inner curtains, there are 11 outer curtains. These things are to be designed and built in such a way that they can be linked inseparably together so that they become a single unit. Now, how many curtains were there? There's a reason for this question. There were 10 on the inside, there were 11 on the outside. Even if they were linked together, there were still 10 curtains. But he says that they become a unit. This is the sense in which the two shall become one flesh. Talking about marriage is to be understood. How the Godhead is called one Godhead, though we have identified three persons in the Godhead. That unit idea does not mean that there cease to be the individuals that make it up. And that also becomes important in the application that we're going to make about this in a little while. So just kind of keep that in your mind. So we've got those curtains of linen. You've got the 11 curtains of goat's hair, and then the covering of ram skins that are dyed red or tanned, again, depending on which translation you're using. And then the goat, porpoise, badger, sea cow skins. By the way, anybody know why almost every translation picks a different animal? Fine leather is actually the most accurate translation. And that's why some of them say goat skin, because goat skin is a very, very durable, high quality leather. So goats were plentiful, so they figured that. There was the sea cow, just so you know, the people that might have read the NIV, that is actually talking about an animal. I can't remember exactly what the name of it is. It is very similar to a manatee, but they are off the coast of North Africa. Where did they leave? They left Egypt. So what did the Egyptians do when they left Egypt? Gave them all sorts of stuff. So is it possible that it's something like that? Yes, it's possible. Some other seafaring creature, possible. Badgers never have understood why, and I think it's the King James that used badger. Not a whole lot of badgers in that part of the world. I'm not sure where badger comes from. But anyway, the point is, we don't really know. However, it is a second layer of a higher quality, more durable leather that would be on the outside and therefore provide protection from the weather and elements. The dew, if you got a leather that is derived from a seafaring animal or something like goat skin, it is more durable against wet conditions and stuff like that than some other leathers. So it's a very practical thing. But we do have these 4 types of covering. We'll talk about them in a little bit more detail in a bit. Then he gets into a discussion of the frame. Look, starting at verse 15. You shall make the boards for the tabernacle of acacia wood. All right, what is acacia wood? Go back, don't advance, go back to where I told you to be. There we go. That's an acacia tree. They were actually rather large trees, and they grow in the arid region and are all over the Sinai Peninsula. It was a very available wood source. But what is most interesting about acacia wood is very hard. It is very durable. It is resistant to decay. It is that part of the world's cypress wood that nothing really messes with it, and it doesn't rot very easily. It was used throughout the construction of the tabernacle's framework, the Ark of the Covenant, the table for the showbread of the presence. Most of the sacred items that had wood in it, that was the wood that God told them to use, probably because they were common and available and of high quality. So again, the Bible doesn't ascribe any special symbolic meaning to the acacia wood, but it does over and over and over again tell us, make this out of acacia wood, make this out of acacia wood. So I don't want to ignore that, but we do want to understand what we're talking about when we talk about acacia wood. So he tells them that the boards, now these are walls, if you will. So we've got these curtains, but we're building walls out of boards. They're going to be fit together rather interesting from an engineering perspective, Mark. I would think that reading through this would be very interesting, how this is all designed and held together. He tells them specifically, 10 cubits shall be the length of each board. So that's 15 feet. 1.5 cubits the width of each board. There shall be 2 tenons for each board, fitted to one another. Thus you shall do for all the boards of the tabernacle, and you shall make the boards for the tabernacle, 20 boards for the south side. You shall make 40 sockets of silver under the 20 boards, 2 sockets under one board for its 2 tenons, and 2 sockets under another board for its 2 tenons. And for the second side of the tabernacle on the north side, 20 boards. And the 40 sockets of silver, 2 sockets under one board, 2 sockets under another board. And the rear of the tabernacle to the west, you shall make 6 boards. By the way, if you pay attention to that, that means the tabernacle was always to face which direction? East. The front was always facing east. The back was to the west. North and south was of the 2 sides. You shall make 2 boards for the corners of the tabernacle at the rear, and they shall be doubled beneath, and together they shall be complete to its top, to the first ring. Thus you shall be with both of them, and they shall form the 2 corners. And so he's describing generally how this thing is put together. Now, I'll show you this. in light of verse 17, this is kind of a description of these things. This right here would be the silver base that he describes, and there's a tenon joint. So you've got this little notch that comes out of the bottom of each board that slides down into that. And then later on, we're going to see there are, I think it's 5 rods that run down each side through rings, kind of like we're on the side of the ark, which hold these things together this way. And so you've got them locked in vertically, you've got them locked in this way, and it just kind of locks the whole structure together. But at the same time, it's very easy to take it down. You pull those rods off the side, lay the boards down, the thing's disassembled. There's no hardware like screws or nails or anything like that holding this stuff together. But it's very carefully crafted to be solid and at the same time to be portable, which just kind of goes to show the extent to which God does these things. Now, where did I stop? 26. All right, we're going to read through verse 30. Then you shall make the bars, these are the things on the side, and I was correct, 5 for the boards of one side of the tabernacle and 5 bars for the boards of the other side of the tabernacle, and the 5 bars for the boards of the side of the tabernacle for the rear side to the west. And the middle bar in the center of the board shall pass through from end to end. You shall overlay the boards with gold and make their rings of gold as holders for the bars, and you shall overlay the bars with gold. Then you shall erect the tabernacle according to its plan, which you have been shown in the mountain. And so we've got this frame that is being described here. Boards of acacia wood overlaid with gold, silver bases and gold rings on the side of these things with bars passing through, acacia wood bars passing through there to lock it all in place and hold it together. This thing wraps around 3 sides of it, which means the front of it doesn't have a wall. That is correct. So you've got the tabernacle. Now, there's a court around the tabernacle. There is a fence of sorts erected around that. You could go into the court. In the court would have been the altar and several other things. The veil, not the veil from the holy place to the Holy of Holies, but and it doesn't use the word veil, it uses another word. I can't recall what it is right now, but we'll read it in just a second. That curtain on the front, nobody could go in there but the priests. That's where the showbread and the lampstand was. Then the veil behind that separated the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy of Holies, which only the high priest could enter. And so that's kind of, now, all of this is building this enclosure and all these coverings, enclosures. All that's kind of important. Each one of especially the veil in the middle of the tabernacle, we're going to see that has a very significant purpose, and it's a shadow of something significant. I think all of them corporately can be viewed that way. What is the tabernacle again? It was the tent of meeting is what it would come to be called. The tent of meeting, is that where they went in to have their church services? Is that what it means by tent of meeting? It's where they met with God. It's where God was. And all of these enclosures are separating people from God. God's inside the mercy seat, and only the high priest can approach God at the mercy seat. The priest can get a little closer to attend to certain things in the tabernacle, passing through the one curtain, but can't pass through the other one. All the rest of the people are separated by 4 coverings. And that, I think, means something. This was also tells me that the process, even though it was, I think, amazingly engineered as far as making it mobile, this was not easy to tear down and move. Wood is not light, especially dense, strong wood, not light when it's overlaid with gold. And though it's easy to take down, you got to take the outside covering off, the next covering off, the next covering off, then take all the boards apart, and then take the inside and put it all away and haul it every time the camp moved. This was not a light ordeal. And so as we read this description, we need to kind of get a feel for how, substantial the tabernacle was. Even though it was portable, it was still quite substantial. And all of those coverings and the wood boards, which we're not told how thick those boards are. There were some Jewish people along the lines that said they were a cubit thick, but that would have made them almost impossible to move. So I think they were exaggerating. But I think it's Josephus said that they were 4 fingers, which is about 3 inches thick. People think that that's a reasonable estimate. I don't know how thick they were, but you get 1, 2, 3 inches of wood plus drapes on the inside and 3 coverings of progressively heavy material on the outside. There's not a whole lot of light in there that is not being supplied by something. There's not a whole lot of noise or sound that's getting in there. Can you imagine how quiet and reflective it becomes as you walk out of the wilderness into this chamber, and you're out of the sun and you're out of the wind and you're out of the noise. You don't hear all the racket because you're approaching God. And it's a substantial thing. All right, 31 through 35. I'm going to go ahead and read 36 and 37 too, and we'll deal with those 2 sections together. You shall make a veil of blue and purple and scarlet material and fine twisted linen. It shall be made with cherubim, the work of a skillful workman. You shall hang it on 4 pillars of acacia overlaid with gold, their hooks also being of gold on 4 sockets. So you got 4 pillars that stretch across, and this drape is going to be hanging off of those. You shall hang up the veil under the clasps, and shall bring the ark of the testimony there within the veil, and the veil shall serve for you as a partition between the holy place and the Holy of Holies. You shall put the mercy seat on the ark of the testimony in the Holy of Holies, and you shall set the table outside the veil, that's the table of showbread, and the lampstand opposite the table on the side of the tabernacle toward the south, and you shall put the table on the north side. You shall make a screen for the doorway of the tent of blue and purple and scarlet material and fine twisted linen, the work of a weaver. I'm going to stop here for a moment and tell you the only thing that I can tell you between the distinction between these 2 things. They're described as being made out of the same material. They're described as having the same color. One of them is called a veil and one of them called a screen. I know the veil in the temple was very heavy. I'm suspecting that the veil was a heavier weave than the outside screen. In other words, the first screen that you pass through is a lighter, and then the one to go into the Holy of Holies is much more substantial. You shall make 5 pillars of acacia wood for the screen Overlay them with gold, their hooks also being of gold, and you shall cast 5 sockets of bronze for them. And so you've got these wooden beams that are vertical, held together, and these screens hanging from them. All right, so a veil of blue, purple, and scarlet with cherubim on it tells me that the whole interior had the same theming. The veil between the Holy of Holies and the holy place looked just like the curtains as far as visually, because they're described the same way. That is a significant purpose. He even goes through the trouble to say the reason for this veil is to separate this place from that, and you put my mercy seat on one side of it and these other things on the other side of it. The showbread, the lampstand are positioned. People have more access to the light and to the bread than God. God's separated from them. And that is part of the symbolism here. Under the law of Moses, well, let me get the screen out of the way, then we'll start talking about some of these things. The screen, again, has the same color scheme. Notice the embroidery is not mentioned on this. There's no cherubim on it. Pillars and sockets for the entrance. It's a substantial thing to construct in the middle of the wilderness and move around for 40 years with you. But anyway, we talked a little bit about the fine linen curtains, the goat hair curtain, which actually had a little bit extra built into it to create a flap, to give it some extra coverage, I guess. The ram skins that are tanned or processed, and some translations say dyed red. I don't know if some just say tanned. That is a protective layer and a soundproof, and they make it more substantial. And then, of course, the outer covering of whatever animal that was made for clearly was designed for the elements. What's interesting to me is they go from more aesthetic to less aesthetic as you move to the outside. Very detailed weaving and embroidery on the stuff inside, very beautiful wood, covered in gold behind that, and then a tent made of hair, and then some ram skins, and then some other skins that aren't even said to be colored. And so what you see is this progression, not just this fundamental progression for practicality's sake, but the beauty of it gets less and less the further we get from God, the less beautiful things are. The closer you get to God, the more precious they are. Under the law of Moses, how much access do the people have to God? An average person like me or you, extremely limited. What we have to do is go talk to a priest. And when it comes to actually obtaining mercy from God, how many of us have access to the high priest? Let me just ask this question. How many of y'all have personally met any cabinet level position of our government? Okay, I get one hand. How many of you met a sitting president and had a substantive conversation with him? Okay, so Moses and Aaron, they way up the chain. Most of us don't get to talk to them on a regular basis. There's a million people in between us and them. We go to the temple for our sacrifices, and whichever priest is on duty, that's who we deal with. The only cases, once you got to hearing disputes and stuff, that Moses heard were which cases? The most significant ones. In fact, there's a whole process that we learn about where he gets other people to adjudicate these things so that he's not burdened by them. Think Supreme Court justices. We might meet a municipal court judge or somebody like that in our community. Most of us are not going to reach those higher echelon kind of people. It wasn't any different for them. I mean, they were in the same camp, and they probably saw them, and they certainly heard them talk. And they may have, at times in their life, had interaction with them, but it was not routine. What was routine for them was to go to whichever priest was on duty, offer their sacrifice, and go home. God was in the temple, behind 4 layers and a wall. And only the high priest could approach the place where God was. All of that changes with the new covenant. Well, to some extent, the priesthood is certainly where they get that from. Matthew 27:51. Very significant verse. Christ is on the cross. Christ dies on the cross. At the moment that Christ dies on the cross, it says, and behold, the veil of the temple. That is that curtain that separates the holy place from the Holy of Holies. The veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 19 and 20. Look with me there, if you will. Therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the holy places. You notice the plurality there? Holy places. And we're not talking about the holy place, but the holy places. By the blood of Jesus, by the new and living way that he opened for us through the curtain, that is, through his flesh. And since we have a great priest over the house of God, etc., have confidence to do what? To draw near to God. What we're being taught is that what Jesus did on the cross opened up access to God. All of those barriers that existed between the person, and these are the people of God. There's even more barriers for those people who are outside of Israel. When they get around to actually building a temple and a temple complex, Gentiles couldn't even go into the outer complex of the temple. Only Jews could. There's all these barriers between man and God, and all of that is torn out of the way through Christ in his blood. The impact of what that means for us should not be overlooked. We have direct access to God through Christ. There is nothing that we have confidence and boldness, 2 words that are used in the scripture, to approach God. They couldn't approach God at all. But we have boldness to go before God and to make our own case before God. Do you think Aaron knew the problems of every single Jew in the camp? When Aaron stood before the mercy seat, you think he rehearsed everybody and every problem that everybody was facing and sought mercy on their behalf? No, he was generically pleading for the forgiveness of the sins of the people, getting atonement for sins. What does he tell us? To make our request known to God. We get to plead our case directly with God because of what Jesus did. And he functions as an advocate for us where? At the right hand of God. There is nothing to impede our access to God. Nothing to impede our access to mercy. Nothing to impede our access to atonement. We don't have to rely upon anyone else to offer sacrifices or to attain forgiveness and atonement. We have access because of what Jesus did. And he's built this big structure and made them haul it around for decades. Well, actually for hundreds of years, because they even used the tabernacle for a long time after they took over the land. It was Solomon who first built a physical structure. And so the significance of the imagery here shouldn't be lost, because it's intended to teach us something important. Anybody have any questions before we stop? All right, if the Lord wills, we will pick up here next time. I got just a few more things about this to talk about, and we'll get into chapter 27 next time, which is going to be the 26th? Nope. Yeah. Is that right?